What does the ad agency of tomorrow look like? If you think you know, well, you're probably wrong. But if you think you'd like to help figure it out, you should probably talk to Jordan Atlas, today's guest on the DesuckifyWork Podcast. Jordan's been figuring stuff out before most of us for the past 20 plus years. He got curious about digital before digital became everything. He moved across the country with his wife and a 3-month-old. And he dove into the world of earned media as his creative friends looked on with a mix of confusion and concern. It all worked out pretty damn well. And now, Jordan's about to embark on a new adventure. Details TBD. But you can be sure it'll be something worth watching and learning from. So, what did we learn during our conversation? Well, we learned that it's possible to focus on great work while also focusing on a great work experience. We learned that we need to recognize the value creatives bring beyond the big awards and the high-profile projects. And we learned that if we want to keep learning, especially in the age of AI and rapid technological change, well, we need to be more experimental, to become less focused on tactics and more on a POV, to become open to just about anything and less attached to the way things are right now. How do we do all that? Well, it starts by creating a world where there's more transparency and more inclusion when it comes to solving the big problems. We need everyone to make this work, and we need all that they can bring. Jordan sure brings a lot to this episode, so let's dive in. Okay, Jordan Atlas, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Hey, TJ, it's so good to be here. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for coming on. I think it's going to be a fun conversation. I think it's a needed conversation. The world of advertising and creative, we're doing some good stuff out there, I think, work-wise lately, but the working environment underneath all of that, I think there's still some room for improvement, shall I say. And I'd love to get your take on that. But before we dive in, you want to just take a minute and tell everyone kind of who you are, what you've been doing for work, and maybe a little bit of how you came to be doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Jordan Atlas, and up until recently, I was the global executive creative director at Edelman. Prior to that, I was our U.S. chief creative officer. Mm-hmm. I'm in Los Angeles with my wife and 2 kids. You'll hear an amazing thing I call silence around here, which is because both the kids are at camp. And, again, for me, it's been the last 10 years was taking a lot of what I learned with the traditional Madison Avenue advertising experience and applying that to the exciting world of earned media. And when I joined, earned media wasn't as ubiquitous of a phrase, but really about something we've all wanted to do is how do you create an idea so good it has to be written about, paid or not paid. But how I got into it, I was an art student at University of Michigan, and which meant I probably smoked a lot of pot and drew pictures. There wasn't an advertising curriculum, but by stupid luck, being part of the fine arts program, graphic design, and a minor in psychology, started to sort of formulate my own, curriculum for it. Right out of college, I joined an ad agency, a small one in South Florida, which I hold like so close to my heart. It was the most amazing experience. It was called Harris Drury Cohen. It's no longer there. But I was the worst photo retoucher, like not just in the agency, but maybe in the industry. But I mean, I think we had Sea-Doo Watercrafts as one of our accounts, and my job was really putting little bubbles on the side, and it was so bad, it looked like thought bubbles. But anyway, the point of that is some of the most amazing mentors and creative leaders, some who've gone on to extreme prominence like Rob Riley, and some other folks who are just killer. I mean, Chuck Meehan's an amazing writer. He was there. Tim Roper is now an amazing director, and so on and so forth. But it was like I kind of was raised by this group of amazing people, and not even just the creatives, Like Michael Goldberg was running accounts, Scott Baylor. These are people that have gone on to do some amazing things, but they were all really creative at heart. We all knew what our roles were, but it was an environment of creativity. And of course, it was led by Mike Tesh, who's in the Hall of Fame, Time to Make the Donuts and Fast Talking FedEx Man. Anyway, I say that because it was really Rob Riley. We'd be there. I mean, you know, I'm 21 years old. We're there all night, and we're working on stuff. You know, whether I was drawing marker comps for him or whatever they needed, I was just like, this is so much fun. This is work. I'm having so much fun. You know, a 6-pack of beer every once in a while. But for the most part, I learned from all of those people about what advertising really was. And then I got into, you know, the sort of the legacy of advertising, the annuals, all that stuff. And I just got absolutely consumed with it all. And so helping Rob and those other people got me kind of out of the studio and got me into, you know, a junior, whatever comes after that, art director. And I spent, you know, the day working and then the nights working on my portfolio. And from there, it was off to New York, where I joined Amirati Puris, which is an amazing place. And then Y&R. And then from Y&R, still in New York, I went over to Digitas because I remember we were on a call at Y&R we were running the Pepperidge Farm Goldfish account. This was right around the time when our clients would go, hey, can you talk to the internet guys? And I was like, you know, a lot of the other creatives I felt were kind of like, whatever, like, yeah, sure. And I was like, I tried to be cool. I was like, yeah, totally, whatever. And then I'd stay on the phone like, I've got so many questions for you all. So I got really curious about the digital side of things before it became the mandate. And that's not like me being prophetic and knowing what was coming. I was just like, writing TV commercials was getting a little boring. And I was like, what else could we do?
Yeah.
And so from there, Digitas was where I was kind of, I don't know if I did like my best work there. That's a nice way to say it, but I learned so much because the people there are amazing. And then from there, my wife and then 3-month-old moved to LA, where I co-led creative at Ignited. I saw that you had Mike Wolfson on, who's fucking awesome. I kind of came in after him. Nice. That dude's fucking, excuse me, that guy's amazing.
No worries about language.
Don't be cursing. Okay. So that dude is fucking awesome, and I love his agency. And then, you know, from Ignited, there would be a couple things that we were doing that kind of caught culture by accident. And I was going, wow, I wish there was a way to make that happen more often. Like the earned side of things. And then that sort of brought that, and the guy who led client leadership over there, Rob Hittner, who's my best friend, he went to Edelman. I followed him. And then the last 10 years. If there's any listeners left, I apologize. That's probably a boring story, but
no, I think it's actually, it's not boring. And I think it's also just like helpful because it shows one path of the many that we can choose through this business. And, you know, interesting to kind of see how you kind of got schooled a little bit early on, kind of from some folks with some heavy sort of traditional shops, but sort of I like the way you said it, like they're all creatives. Like the idea, like I think that's what a lot of people are searching for right now is everybody is tuned into that frequency, whatever your role is. So I thought that was interesting. You know, the decision to embrace digital is interesting. I think we all got hit with that at some point in our careers and had different reactions to it, you know, and then, you know, sort of really embrace it by going to Digitas and kind of going, okay, what is this? And then, you know, making a move with a 3-month-old child across the country sounds like that would be just a perfectly easy experience. And then, you know, kind of coming into an agency that, you know, is sort of trying to embrace some of that digital world, but also kind of bringing some of they had the heavy media chops as well. So it was kind of a really interesting space there. And then, you know, now if you say somebody, you know, you go work for an agency with PR history, I think most people go, yeah, whatever. Like, but like when you did that was not really a thing people were doing. You know, Edelman hadn't really established itself. Golan hadn't established itself. Some of the other big PR based shops had really not done that thing yet. So it was a little bit of a leap of faith there, which if nothing else, I think if people come away with like every once in a while, take a leap of faith. If your heart's sort of pointing you in a direction, that's a pretty good lesson to take away from that as well. And then I think what comes out of that, that's a question that shows up for me a little bit as you've kind of navigated some of the changes in our business firsthand. I think about, people, we just had the Cannes Awards and all that. Like, I think people are a little confused right now. Like, what is good work? You know what I mean? Because it's like, it used to be a little simpler, right? You had this umbrella campaign, TV kind of led the way. You had some fun print stuff and out of home, maybe a couple of funny radio spots or something. And it was really easy to judge and understand. But somebody's coming up now and either trying to make their way, building up their portfolio, or even somebody who's a CD or higher who's trying to go, what are we looking for? What's your perspective on that?
It's such a good question. And before I answer, I really appreciate what you were saying in terms of picking up on the things that drove me to Edelman or even to Ignited, which was taking a leap of faith. I mean, my mom was joking to me when I told her we were moving to LA. She's like, new city, new job, new kid. Like, that's so you. I never saw myself that way, but I guess there was always a bit of like a, fuck it, let's just try, and I think not in a cavalier way and not often, just big swings. And so with Edelman, to your point about 10 years ago, whether it's Golan or Weber or these, it was a very head turning decision for people like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I met the most amazing people in the interview process at Edelman. And I was like, every person I met was hungry for creativity, not creative.
Yeah.
I always hated that our department was called creative. It's an adjective, right? But also like the creativity is that sort of, invisible energy that runs through it. And I do believe, and creative is not everybody's job, but it is everybody's responsibility.
Yeah.
And to be able to, fuel the fire of creativity where it's alive and then sort of ignite it where it's dormant. Like that was why I was excited to be at Edelman. Honestly, I never thought that we would go on to be in contention for, again, if you love awards, anyone listening, that's fine. But be in that same conversation. It wasn't my mission. It was just, for me, it was like a little entrepreneurial, which I don't find myself to ascribe to that. But I think I was the creative department of one for a while, and that LA crew was a little startup within the mothership. And so that's, being able to hold on to that ethos all the way through was the best thing.
Yeah.
Now, to answer your question, and I won't keep doing that, I promise. What is great work? I mean, it is a lot harder to see. And just like in the past, I do believe if you look at the award shows, a lot of people are now creating things that they believe will be award-winning work. I think, purpose is one of those words that you could see a lot of things in. I think people are sort of like dipping in and dipping out of very important issues just to get some medal, which I find to be a little bit off-putting, to say the least. But at the end of the day, why I love the earned space is because there's a purity to what a great idea is. There's a tension that you're pushing up against. There's a, if the world is, if a problem is a house, it's just a different door to go in. It creates a conversation that most people would go, fuck, I didn't think of it that way. And it's not necessarily, in my opinion, the things that win awards. In other words, about 6 months in Edelman, I was thinking, how do I define what earned is to like my friends that said, what the hell are you doing at Edelman? And I used to say, the earned stuff to me is when my mom sees it on the Today Show before my buddy at Droga 5 sees it in Adweek.
Right.
Some big idea that like captivated and galvanized culture where people are like, oh shit, did you see that thing? I said earlier, I got sort of sick of writing TV spots because after a while, and I love great TV spots. I can name off all my favorites, but it got to a point where it was almost like I was hanging my little drawing on the world's largest refrigerator. Like, look at my little thing I made, but it's all contrived. The couple doesn't look like they go together. And the problem is all that stuff. So being able to solve a problem B, maybe create an action or a new business that could solve that problem. That to me is what the great ideas are. And maybe the flip side of that is the gratuitous, we just created this problem so we could solve it with this. I think there's a fraudulence to that sort of it reeks a little bit, that I will always go, I could see how award shows would like that, but I don't think that is a good idea.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And I think there's an undercurrent of what you're talking about in the industry. A lot of people, look at the award shows, and certainly you can appreciate almost everything there on some level. You can appreciate, even if it's not your cup of tea. It's like, I get it. Like, I get why it's getting recognized. But I think the lack of genuineness underneath it, the lack of serving the client and the brands and the business's needs in the most genuine way, that rubs a lot of us, I think, the wrong way. And I know, and I get why it happens. There's a lot of rewards to winning awards, and there's incentives there. But I think a lot of people are craving what you talk about. I'm curious, when you think about, the kinds of work that maybe you did at Edelman, and I'm not necessarily looking for like the one, but like, is there anything that comes to mind in terms of the kind of work you did or a specific project that represents a bit of what you're talking about here? Yeah.
And it's fun. What's so great about this kind of conversation is more and more ideas are coming to me in terms of helping define what great work is. I keep doing this. I keep answering something else before I get to your answer, but I do think, there's also like a simplicity and almost an obvious nature to the great ideas I'm talking about. The kind of thing we're like, oh, well, of course you should do. Yes, you should do that. Yeah. And then you surround it with top level, top shelf craft to bring it to life in a way that no one would ever thought. But at the core of it, it's like, oh, if that's the problem, then why don't we just, and I mean, for me, I always said, especially at Edelman, I feel like 5 or 6 years ago, no, less than that. When I took over the US, my purview about what the work would look like, I wanted to make sure everyone could be motivated and inspired and thrilled to be working with me at this level. And I said to them, sometimes our work changes the world and sometimes it just changes someone's day. And both of those things are equally important to me. So for every See My Skin that we did with that first database to show, or Pay with Change, which was something we did for Sports Illustrated, where advertisers couldn't buy their way into their heralded issue. They had to earn it with change that they were doing. Or even, and this last one was before I was the US CCO. This is like Jimmy Stone and Jesse Suckman at Edelman. The Good Humor, that song that was playing in those trucks, they found out its heritage was racist. So they got the RZA and they re-recorded it. And now in perpetuity, that is what is played in those ice cream trucks. Wow. And I can tell you, I mean, I can't say guarantee because I wasn't in the room, but like Jesse Suckman and Jeremy Bush, the strategist, once Jeremy brought that insight to life, it took Jesse all of 30 seconds to come up with that idea. I wasn't there, but the problem was so there. Boom. And that's the kind of shit that I love to see. That being said, sometimes a post that you make on behalf of the brand, that's going to change someone's day. And in effect, will actually change people's opinions of that brand. So like, I just want to celebrate the big and the small. Yeah. So for every purpose-driven thing that I did at Edelman, I also did the Taco Bell Hotel, which was just like, what would we do if we gave all the money to those super fans? What would they do? Well, wouldn't it be ironic if our transactions with them is like a minute 30 because it's a quick service restaurant. But what if we spent the weekend together or maybe 4 days together? And then it became a living, breathing manifestation of what they love about the brand if they could be in charge. We didn't solve the world's problem, but damn if we didn't make people's day. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate both of those things. And I appreciate giving them equal measure in terms of what you appreciate, right? I think, the first part of that is certainly what a lot of people are reaching for, and certainly gets a lot of the most recognition out there. But there is a lot of value, and I think helping
creatives, as well as just the whole team, feel recognized for doing that work, I think is really important. I think, if you talk about this idea of desuckifying work, one of the challenges we can have is, people show up and they can often feel like, oh, I'm either not working on the big thing, I'm not on the right account, I'm doing work that nobody notices. So simply noticing it and then saying, that's important, and I'm glad you're here to do it, is a big part of that. Why do you think we're not so good at that?
I think Matthias Ronge is one of the two brothers that used to run EMEA, and he always talked to me about what's the effect of the effect. That's one of his lenses. He would get to really great ideas because it's so easy to go, oh, if this is the problem, then this is the solution. He'd go, but why is that the solution? What is the emotion that's lying in that? Because there's probably something deeper. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I think there's a fear involved with all that. I think there's a fear of not those who don't showcase all of the work and just go to the shiny object that has the most hype right now. There's safety in that. And there's no growth in it either. So you're basically, what you're doing is you're going, that thing that everybody in the world, award shows and journalists love, I love it too, and let's showcase that. And there's a feeling that, oh, if I showcase that in an all staff, everybody will feel that energy and run out of the room and do their next thing. But it all comes down to what opportunities am I giving them to do that? And so I think the fear drives a lot of these decisions. I think we'll get to it probably later, but drive a lot of the decisions in terms of return to office and all that kind of stuff. But I think people miss the obvious sometimes. And that to me was one of the first things that I thought of was like, wow, if I'm going to create a community across the US of creatives, there's the haves and the have-nots. Like, how do I balance that out a little bit? And one way is to let them know that all shapes and sizes does good work come. And again, I'm not saying they're equal, but if we take some of the power out of the output, which maybe is an award show, and go, what's a different output? Oh, you grew the business by 30% because of the consistent work you did there. Hey, that's a career, So I think maybe another way to say is dimensionalizing, or at least opening the aperture of what success looks like and what output and recognition looks like is one way to spread that wealth a little bit, and thus maybe a culture of connectivity is born,
Yeah. And I think that's great. I think it's a good sort of example for other leaders to think about, and I don't even necessarily think it's just creative leaders, but it really shows up in the creative space around helping people see the value that they're bringing, and that it's appreciated. I think, the big challenge, and I think I've talked about this on some other episodes, but it's a really big challenge in my eyes. Like, the way we're quote unquote graded as creatives is, it's that phrase, it's all about the work. And then there's the portfolio, and then there's the award shows and all that stuff. And it all pulls us towards that direction of doing the big shiny thing. Versus, like you said, you build a career by solving these different kinds of problems, different metrics. You grew the business, you helped create the framework for a relationship with that client that ultimately allows us to take some of the big swings. And there's not really a good way to capture that and share that. So, like, if I'm a creative, I'm a senior writer and I'm walking in somewhere and I've done a lot of that work,
right?
And maybe haven't done the big swings. I don't have an easy way to kind of go, I'm valuable,
right?
So how do you, as a leader, how can any of us, as a creative leader, find those people and maybe help those people better communicate the value they bring?
Yeah, again, such a good question. I think one of the principles that I set up at Edelman was that the how is every bit as important as the what. Because we all know the work.
Yeah.
And I love that for them. And they do amazing work, and a lot of my colleagues and friends are there. But for me, at a place like Edelman, who was just dipping its toe into what creativity could do to drive business growth.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was really important. I was joking. I was like, we got to celebrate the bricks and the mortar,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the things that hold the things together have got to be on equal ground. So to your point, like celebrating not just the output, but going, hey, to the account lead, that conversation you had a week ago with the client clearly set us up to sell that amazing work. God bless you for that. The project manager, the resource manager, the most thankless jobs behind the scenes, they're like the ingredient brand, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But the more we spread that, at least internally,
mm-hmm.
I think I have a phrase like, those aren't billable hours, but they're buildable hours. They
mm-hmm.
build culture, they build connectivity, they build cohesiveness and chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And it pays dividends later on, because the next time you work together, everyone's feeling a little more, they're sitting up a little straighter. They know what their role is.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what an industry sort of, for lack of a better word, badge would be, you know, because you got I won a Cannes Lion, or I won, but I do think more and more in the world we're working, or the industry we're working right now, that word of mouth and those conversations about people who are looking for jobs, the
mm-hmm.
more examples you have of that, those things are spoken about in rooms you may not be in.
Yeah.
So you might have the logo of Cannes on your piece of work or whatever it is. And again, nothing against that. These things are who you want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Especially at Edelman, I'll say it for any place. The kind of work we did at Edelman, you know, curse or blessing, none of us could do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we won, we'd have to celebrate the win together. When we lost, we had to make sure that we figured out what went wrong. But
mm-hmm.
while we were doing it, having respect for each person's role during it, that's the kind of thing that's like a resource that regenerates. And so I don't know, maybe we could figure that out. What a cool, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It feels almost like an interesting creative brief, right? Like how to better communicate the value beyond the shiniest objects of creatives and others in this world. And I actually think it's doable. And I think you want to bring creativity to it and think about, like, you know, I'm thinking, like, if I'm building my portfolio, how can I communicate some of those things? I could just say it, you know, I'm the glue that holds the team together and da-da-da-da-da. But maybe I make a goofy video, or maybe I like go around and talk to like 20 people who say some of those things about me. And then maybe I create a series of memes. Like there's like, I think if you can tell your story in a creative way, it shows both like, this is who I am, this is the value I bring, but I appreciate that what we ultimately are doing here is trying to use creativity to communicate. So even when I'm trying to tell my own story about who I am, I try to do it in a way that's a little bit more interesting and inventive. So I think there's potential in that. I mean, I don't know.
One of the things that we did as well during these all staffs was, it's so easy to be there and you push play on a case study.
Mm-hmm.
But what we would have is we would bring people in to talk us through where it went wrong and how they refocused us. And those were usually, sometimes it was a creative, sometimes it was a strategist, but a lot of times it was just someone who was part of the team, an earn lead, or someone from analytics. And I think that's where the how becomes so important. So I think more stories like that, I think direct quotes from clients or colleagues, I think those things should be valued when you're showcasing your work. I certainly do that. Again, there was a time early in my career where, I was on the awards, like teat, I guess.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
But they're the result, not the reason that we do those things. And I've grown, candidly, I've grown less inclined to talk about them. A lot of reasons, there's so many of them now. You know what I mean? And there's so many categories in them. And again, I'm not saying winning them is not hard. It's just, I think for me, connecting with people during the process, it's the people you're with. It's Tuesday night at 8:15. Everybody wants to get dinner, whatever it is. And there's an energy in the room. Somebody says something and that becomes the boulder that makes the river go the other way in the positive way. And I'm going to think of nothing but some kind of industry related recognition, a good housekeeping seal, whatever it is. It's something that, because I think we don't, nobody can predict what's coming in terms of creativity and AI and all stuff, but and the way in which we work, that's something we can still control.
Yeah. And in many ways, that's like our biggest lever in the face of all of this. And I think, we talk a lot about like the work and all that, like the way we work. And, this is something I think a lot about. Getting to good work, I think there used to be, and maybe there's still some hangover from this culturally, that like any path to great work is worth it, no matter who you trample over, what you burn down. Like if it's in service of the work, that's great. And I personally just think that that's not right. I think how you get there matters. So what does it look like when you're getting to good work and you're not sort of scorching the earth to get there? What are some of the things you do to make that happen?
Yeah. And I think I think people mistake kindness and niceness. Mm-hmm. They conflate. Like, I think that, I operate from a place of optimism and kindness. It just fits me better. It's just how I like to be. Mm-hmm. It's not calculated. I just don't know how to do it any other way. So the idea of trampling people by, hell or high water, we're going to do this. It's just not something I ever ascribe to. But feedback, open communication, learning how to talk to people about what's not working so we can get to what's working. Mm-hmm. That to me is like a load-bearing wall in terms of how a team can run. Letting them know this is the reason why this isn't going to work. Here's what I'd like to see more of versus here's what I'd like to see less of. Even that shift can help. Yeah. But so those conversations aren't easy, but they have to happen because it's not everyone hold hands. Look, we're all amazing. This is great. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Yeah. To your point, getting to that great work is hard, but there's a way to get people to keep marching that way with you versus, fuck this, I'm not doing it. I'll get the next one. Yeah. That's to me just an empathy, a clarity, and a kindness, and a focus, right? Yeah. And I've seen that work, and I can look at the work at Edelman that I'm so proud of, whether I did it or not, whether I touched it or not. And I know for the most part, what's great about where I used to work is that, they say that an idea can come from anyone. We do so many different things at Edelman that somebody who operates in a crisis management space all day long comes into a meeting and says something, and you're like, ooh, that's a different door. I never thought about that. They don't think they just came up with an idea, and maybe they didn't. But they definitely came up with a spark that's got me thinking differently. And then you get into, again, it's productive tension. Again, you need those things. I'm not a let's do a brainstorm person, but I'm also not a let's not do a brainstorm person. I think coming prepared, having a day to think about things and then going into a brainstorm, I think that's very valuable. I think, but I think at the end of it, it's clear communication, kindness, having the hard conversations to what's not working, and then letting people know where we're going and what we need more of. Yeah. Yeah. I think that those hard conversations were not trained for them at all. So you kind of have to like bump and bruise your way into getting good at them. I feel like, God, I was talking to somebody earlier today, and he works totally different space, like in the healthcare space. And he said he had the best CEO he ever had was somebody who, as soon as you became a manager, kind of like the equivalent of maybe like an ACD in our world. Right. Like you get into that space. One of the first things you do is you go through crucial conversation training. Amazing. And it's just, I was sitting there like, oh man, like not that we're maybe at the same scale as the healthcare space, but like our job is in advertising and in creative is so reliant on ongoing conversation and ongoing feedback that, to not have people have those skills developed just seems like it's like an own goal. It's like, what are we doing to ourselves? Do you see any signs that we're starting to recognize the value of those things, or is it still more like, well, hopefully you figure it out on your own? Well, I think it's both. I've seen signs that we have recognized that there's a need for it. I think what gets challenging is satisfying that need with existing staff.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, let's go to the health and wellness space. Like those crucial conversations, that is an art. That's as much of an art as the copywriter, the art director, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But having people, just because they're in HR, try to traverse that and satisfy that, like that's too much for them. And I think all of a sudden it becomes yet another thing people have to do versus something they want to do. So if people really want to invest in that crucial conversation, bring in the experts.
Yeah.
Like make this be an important enough thing for a 2-day offsite or whatever it is, and then reward and incentivize people to do that. At the end of the year, it's not just how much the business grew, because there's a lot of people that help with that.
Yeah.
I think, the idea of like, at the end of the review season, when you see certain comments that people made about people, specific examples, whatever it is, I think making people feel connected and responsible for those conversations and then rewarding it and incentivizing it, I think that would be really interesting, because that would when we start this thing, that would be action versus talk.
Yeah.
And so, but the good part about that is, just like anything else, you get really good at it the more you do it. And so it doesn't take up that much time.
No, it doesn't. And I think, the combination of doing it and having clear mechanisms for understanding if I did it well, meaning that you've brought in some experts, you've created some sort of means of evaluating how did that go. It's part of your ongoing process when you're working with teams. And then, when you evaluate at the end of the year, it's like, how did you do with your crucial conversations? Let's talk through some examples where maybe you were trying to get feedback on work and somebody was just really not having it. How did you ultimately work your way through that? Because that's reality. I think in advertising, and this is something I've thought about. I don't think we're generally very good at communication. It's the irony of advertising. But I think we're actually compared to other industries, from what I've been learning through this podcast, we're actually a little more avoidant of stuff like this, helping people get better at the sort of crucial, quote unquote, soft skills that make us better at our jobs. And we're very much focused on the tactical, the craft, the things that ultimately win awards and all that stuff. We're big on that, but how to be a good leader, how to be a good employee. What does it mean to work somewhere and show up and do things well? I feel like we just kind of put our head in the sand on that way more than other industries. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a few reasons. One is, for a long time, we glorified this sort of notion of a creative genius. And I think it was kind of like, just get out of this. I was going to say, get out of his way. And I was almost going to correct myself. But back then, it sort of engendered really bad behavior. And it was like, doesn't matter. I can speak the way I want to. I can tell you F off, whatever. And now I'm not cursing. But the point is, all these different things. And we would reward it because that's what it took. And I think we never properly recalibrated. We just kind of swept it over there. It's almost like we let culture at large dictate our changes versus us dictating them from within. And then the idea that people just go, well, I saw that when I was coming up, I'm going to replicate it as well. And then the sad part is, these soft skills, some people look at them as margin shrinkers. Because you go, well, that's going to take time. That's going to cut into our margin. And nowadays, when people are very, very concerned about the business, it's like when schools cut the art program first. I think, not realizing how invaluable that is. I think people in agencies are going quicker, less people, just get to the thing, and it's a short-sighted solution to a very long-term problem that will rear its ugly head sooner rather than later, Yeah,
I think it is rearing its head. I mean, I think if you look at the lack of investment in those areas, the general short-term nature of our thinking, and then you kind of look at the trajectory of the ad business over time, and it's kind of shrinking relevance in many ways. in the larger business landscape. I don't think those things are disconnected. I think there's a direct relationship there, while other industries, not perfect, but I think whether it's the world of consulting or other spaces, put more energy into thinking about how do we have the best people and train the best people to do the work and to have the mindsets that are needed for whatever's coming, and that leads me to kind of this whole discussion about things like AI and whatever's coming. I think everybody's freaking out, and that's sort of normal. It's like a new disruptive big thing. But what do you think we need to be doing to better equip the business or individual agencies to move into this space with confidence versus kind of running from fear, which is what it feels like right now?
Yeah, and it is a lot of running from fear. And it's interesting how people react to fear. Some people will stand up a white paper and look at me, I'm an expert on this thing that's changing as quickly as I've posted this.
Yeah.
Other people will go, us versus them, right? There's a purity to this thing. And, and that reminds me of because I'm 51. So when I got into this business, they were still hand setting tight. There's a lot of things happening before the computer.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm not saying it's the same thing, but I've heard the bemoaning before, I think, again, if there's ever been a time to get really good at collaborating, it's now, because the collaboration with AI, again, there are certain things, a taste level, a way in which to describe what you're looking for, specifically what you're looking for. The output is only as good as the input. Like, these are things creative directors have been doing for a very long time. I think you could say as a parallel, it's what great communication has always done. This is a specific thing I'm looking for right now. That's my prompt to you in the meeting. So that's human to human, but in the same way with AI, I think learning to dance with this stuff and get excited by it it's the best way to turn that fear of the unknown into something, because you only need one. You need to create one thing with you, go, oh, fuck, this is awesome. And then you've converted. Yeah. And so again, I'm not saying anything about those who are just like putting up a wall against it. I just would love those folks to invite themselves to just try and dabble and play a little bit. One thought when, maybe it was like a year ago when it was starting to happen, I got a sense that a lot of people, let's go with account executives or folks that have had to deal with creatives. They were going like, yeah. You know what I mean? Because they used to say, well, they're going to take our jobs. But it's funny how, like, if you think about Adam, writing a press release, there's a lot of, so everybody has an opportunity to grow, and everybody has an opportunity to play with these new tools. And, I don't think we need more experts. I think we need more experimenters. And I think that's why, and I'm early days with this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm having fun,
Yeah. I think having fun, I think embracing with the sort of curiosity that we've embraced other stuff. I think maybe not getting so caught up in it as the magic pill, like we like to do in the business. There's always some new magic thing. And then I think underneath all of this, and this also sort of connects back to what we were just talking about the sort of short-termism, there's a fear that AI is just going to basically, magnify all of that. And it's just going to be about cranking through stuff almost without any thought. And how do we create the space for the big picture thinking? I think that's something that people have been freaking out about even before AI. It's like we've just been squeezing that out because pace has changed so much and we're so fast and we're so this. Like, what can we, or what have you done to help leave room for the big picture thinking that needs to necessarily be a little bit more deliberate, intentional, and a little bit slower, so to speak, in the midst of all of this sort of turmoil and disruption?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to sound really like sort of rudimentary, but like if there's a certain amount of time that we have on a project, like, so when I'm talking to project managers and stuff, I see what their timelines on things are. And I look at that and I go, this is the illusion of progress. because you're cutting away this so we can get to this. But so I think baking in the proper time with the right people upstream, it will never be the way we had it at one point.
Yeah.
But nothing matters after this early part if we haven't been deliberate and clear about what the bigger idea is. I know big idea, it's like it's one of those phrases, but what is our point of view on this problem?
Yeah.
I think that's really, and for me, I've been able to get more time because I rephrase it like that. Like it's not worse. Oh, creative is, it takes too long and prima donnas and all stuff. It's like, no, you've got a problem that needs to be solved. To get to a unique point of view on that problem, that's where we should be spending our time. And if we do that, we can make it up on the back end with AI, with execution. But if we rob ourselves of our point of view, how the hell are we going to know if we got it right?
Yeah.
So that's how I think using these tools would become really fun, because the time has to be spent on the point of view, whether you call that a big idea, whatever it is. But I find those things to be very similar. And again, a point of view is just one more step till you get, then if that's our perspective on this, what if we, and there we have it, and I think of there's so many big ideas that we could talk about. It's like one that was celebrated, all the awards and stuff like that, but it never got in the canon the way I thought it would, which is that after hours athlete for Puma.
Okay. Yeah.
5 did. I saw that and I was like, God damn it. Because that was like a point of view in that particular category, a category where the best ads have always been done. And if their point of view was, well, there's a different type of athlete, it didn't take long to get, I imagine I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But that's something that AI is not going to be able to do without us.
Yeah.
So, I believe.
I believe that too. And I think I think people are feeling a little bit stuck in the hamster wheel of the tight schedules and the increasingly clear feeling to most people that before I kind of knew there was maybe some big idea, and I felt like I could connect to that. And now it's becoming more and more of, I'm on this hamster wheel and I'm just moving something from here to here every day. Like I'm suddenly devolving into an assembly line worker. And it's just strange, I think, to a lot of people, one, that we're just sitting here allowing that to sort of happen, and that people aren't taking the 5 minutes that I think it takes to realize how much this would be better if we took your thought of, let's put most of our human capital into having a point of view, seeing what emerges from that point of view in terms of how we solve certain problems, and then using whatever technology is in front of us, AI, something else that comes next, to solve that. And I think then brings me to this question. If you look at the world of marketers and the problems that they're currently facing, and you were to design a company to solve the challenges that they're facing, how much would it look like an ad agency?
Oh, I think about this all the time, and I think it would it would look very little, but there would still be it's almost like when you take this is going to be a shitty analogy, but when you take a painting off the wall, you know that there was once a rectangle there, but that's it. Yeah. So I think there would be something that was reminiscent of it, but I would say 90% of it would be completely different. And that's really been informed by, working through advertising agencies, working through digital agencies, going over to communications and earned, helping drive that evolution, falling in love with the business side of things. When I got to Ignited, my creative partner at the time, Troy Scarlett, he's a really great creative, but dude, that guy should be a CEO. So business savvy. And I didn't know shit when we met. I was so scared that they were going to fire me because I was sitting next to him. Yeah. But we rode together for a good time because we learned from one another and from him. And then he said, Rob Hittner, who ran client services, my best friend at works at Edelman, I learned to love the business. So all of those things would make me paint a complete new picture or put up scaffolding in ways that has never been done before, I believe.
Yeah.
It would be reminiscent of it, but it would be very little else.
Yeah. I like that. And I think that's true. And I think it's interesting to see how things will evolve here in the next few years to see what crops up to try to serve those needs. And in some ways it's interesting because you mentioned that kind of imprint, that rectangle that's left. And I think back to like, to use the easy, like the Don Draper days, like there's a lot of that is responsible for the challenges we're having now. But I think underneath it, one, there was an appreciation for business that was there that I think got maybe a little bit lost over time. And it was, I think back then, like trying to line up with the needs of the clients, however imperfectly. And I think we've just got so much residual stuff that we're carrying around. And it would just be, really interesting to see different companies try to pop up and go, actually, we don't even need the creative department in the same way anymore. Like copywriters and art directors and that. It is, we need people who can bring a point of view, who maybe have certain expertise in certain areas so that they can understand what good design and good art direction looks like, what good writing looks like. But it's less about you're going to be the person who does those things. And you're more like, you're going to be the person who brings the point of view and then says, what of this do I need to kind of mash together to make it? And that's a different mindset. It's scary, like we've been riding this train for a long time and it's like sort of easy to plug into it. I always liked writing. I'm going to be a copywriter. It's a little less certain, but my hunch is that's what's needed.
Well, it is. And again, without getting too much into something I've been working on for the last month that I'll, because we're friends, I want to share with you when we're not talking, because I want to make sure it comes off the right way. But it really is in a reimagining, still looking at that rectangle, because that's where we started.
Yeah.
Reimagining almost everything. It's funny, when I first got to Edelman, I was only creative in the LA office by title.
Yeah.
And candidly, I wasn't sure it was going to work. So I didn't hire anybody right away because the worst thing would be like, it didn't work. Now you're out of it.
Sorry. Yeah.
But a couple people would come by my office and they would say, hey, you're the new creative guy. I'm so-and-so. I'm a pretty creative person too. And I would, oh, that's awesome. What are things you do? And everyone from a writer to someone who knew Photoshop to a woman that was an illustrator. And I was like, I could probably make something of just that. And so for the first 3 or 4 months, I just partnered with these people that already worked there to sell some social campaigns. Nothing that would burn the house down in a good way, but it just was enough to beget revenue to hire creatives.
Sure.
And the point that I'm making is when I did hire those creatives by title, I started partnering them with those original few pioneers that helped me get this off the ground. And a creative culture was born versus a creative department. And so that's something that's very special about the Edelman LA office in the early days, which was me just going kind of what I'm doing now, just 10 years later, is like experimenting it. I used to talk about like, my late brother, Jeff, we loved the movie Moneyball. And it was kind of what I was doing. I was just moneyballing my way into a creative group. I was like 20% of this person, 30%, I could get us to do it. And I think that kind of thinking where you're not burdened by overhead and you're not burdened by, we got to get those people working because they're being paid. Like, how do you figure out a model that, what I'm working on right now is, grow as we go type of thing. And so I think that to me gets really exciting. It's a scary time and I get that. But it's also, these are the scary times that you go, oh, what we could do. Yeah. And if you don't think necessarily beyond next week, it's kind of fun. You know what I mean?
It is. And I think that brings me down to like some of what I think is missing a little bit from the business, which is that spirit of fun, the spirit of experimentation. I think it's a tough time. I mean, the job market's obviously very uncertain for a lot of folks. People are feeling scared and uncertain. And there is this sort of lack of fun. And then you layer on all the global unrest, and then you layer on things like people want more purpose at work. And then you layer on they talked about the return to office. Like, I think there's probably 10 different opinions you can have on something like return to office, and I can understand them. Like, I don't know that there's one right answer. I think the bigger thing that's maybe missing is some broader sense of trust in people, and trust that people are remarkably creative, not just creative department people, but creative and able to solve some of these problems if we allow them to. Do you think we can get to that space where that mindset is accepted more, and we're able to let go of the need to kind of control everything?
I think, and I'll make sure I don't say this in the wrong way. I think it'll take a changing of the guard.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think, and it's not, I'm not faulting anyone. When you've been doing something for a certain way, for a certain amount of time, a certain way, it's very hard to not think you know the answer. But you said the word trust, and I think that's a big thing. Is I think, if we look back during the pandemic, some very, very scary things happened, but some remarkable things happened.
Yeah.
I remember the first team meeting I had with the creative, it was like 30 people at that time. And I remember getting on a call with our Monday morning. We all did those Monday morning, let's have coffee together in our little rooms and stuff. And I remember saying to, I think it was Anna, who was like a junior designer. I was like, okay, I've been doing this for 20 years. We just hired Anna. It's been a month. She and I have the exact same experience of what we're about to go through. Because I never led through something like this. None of us did. Yeah. Just that put people at ease a little bit. Yeah. And then when you get to the larger thing about how we're going to run a business, I think there's lots of data that says maybe we were more profitable or productive in that time. I don't have it in front of me. And the last thing anyone wants me is quoting data that I don't have. But it did take that toothpaste, and now it's hard to get it back in the tube. And then you go, but what are they doing? What are they doing out there when I don't see them? And that comes down to the trust. And that's who you got to evaluate who you're working with and who's leading and can you count on these people? But I believe one size fits one when it comes to this. And I think the more we experiment with different things, again, a lot of people go, well, you're going back to, we're going to give you 3 days back in the office, but you get to pick which days. And it's like, that's not a choice. That's the best of bad. And so, again, that's already cutting people out of the conversation by saying, I've come up with a solution. Your freedom exists within a small part of my solution. We've got to get to a place where the trust is there and we allow people to work in the rhythm about which they do the most things. Again, I think that's one way we get people to, and then back to high, wide, and handsome and loyalty. I think that's one way you get retention numbers like Mike and his crew have. But I also think it's another way. It's just going, hey, I trust you. I mean, back to the soft skills. I mean, saying that, deliberately doing an action that supports that, that's got to be one lever we pull,
I think so. And as you say that, I'm sitting here going like, to create trust, I think you have to start one with a certain optimism about humanity, that people are generally inherently worthy of that trust. But I understand that then there's still some process that then strengthens that bond. And I think that comes all the way back to this idea of being a more human-centered organization, and really sort of seeing people, getting to know who they are on a deeper level, and valuing them for what they bring, and absorbing all of that. Because as you bring all of that into an organization, that's how those bonds of trust, I think, can get built more. It's like, this is a group we're actively encouraging everybody to show up as their fullest selves, bringing all of their good stuff. And I trust you. I know you. And that doesn't mean like if you have a 5,000 person thing that as a CEO, you literally know everyone, but you funnel that through the team so that every team knows each other. And then this team, and so that work, and coming back to, I think, a point you made earlier, that's the work that's actually going to make our margins look respectable again. And there's actually some decent data lately that's come out to really support that more human-centric, giving people more connection to meaning and purpose at work, helping people, driving engagement at work, all of those things lead to all of the P's, the profits and the higher performance and the productivity, all the stuff that CEOs are staying up nights worrying about. So I think it all comes together.
Yeah. One of the last things I was doing for HP at Edelman was this WRI, which is work relationship index that Emily Greener, who's a strategist, was leading. And so much of what we're talking about is in this data. But cool. I think the idea of like, Emily used to say, like, just, and again, she's a strategist. I'm the creative, but when we were ideating together, because that's another way that I like to work.
Yeah.
We'd say, like, what if there was a work in the image of TJ? Like, just the malleability of the working experience that fits your life and the productivity doesn't drop whatsoever. Just test and learn. I think that's, again, anyone that says they have the answer, they're crazy.
Yeah.
I think there's probably going to be some failure that goes along with it. But to think that we can go back to a time and use that as the thing to jump off of, I think is that's a false hope. That's like building a house on some stilts. Like it's just.
No, I agree. And as you talk about that test and learn, and you've mentioned the idea of experimentation, I think that's probably one of the biggest mindset shifts we need to sort of succeed. I think if you hold on desperately to all of the tools of the past, you might like slow your decline a little bit by micromanaging for a while. Eventually, though, you're just going to drop. Versus if you experiment, you're going to have more of this.
Right.
Well, that trend line is going to go way more up. That's the only way we go up, I think. Exactly.
And that's where it goes. Like, instead of measuring quarter to quarter, if we can say our 2-year or 3-year plan is going to be this, then you can adjust along the way, but don't panic.
Don't drop it. Yeah.
Don't drop it, because that's where you may be building trust, but the moment you go the other way from the thing you promised, getting back up to it's almost impossible.
I agree.
And to your point earlier about with the 5,000 person, head count, like Edelman's like 6,000 people. When we were amazing is when we got that 24-year-old or 25-year-old to speak and believe in the same way that leadership was about what we're doing.
Yeah.
I can't put a price on what that voice at that stage in his, her, their career means to recruiting and retention. I mean, with all the fancy titles and stuff, that person would, great. They want to talk to this person who's doing it. I think
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference. I want to start kind of wrapping us up.
Yeah, I know. I'm just talking so much.
That's okay. No, I think everything you're saying is really hitting, and I appreciate it. But I want to get to a few final questions. There's one that I was thinking about today that might be kind of fun, if you're up for it. So I'm looking forward to sort of the next guest, and it's somebody I'm sure you're at least aware of, George Tenenbaum.
Oh God, this guy's amazing.
Well-known dude, ECD level guy who now has his own little shop and brilliant writer, like ridiculously prolific in terms of his blog posts and his own ads and comments. He's going to be my guest next week. So I'm curious, as you think about him, is there any question you would like me to ask him?
Oh, that's first of all, great get, especially after this pathetic one. But no, I think George is so amazing. And what I will say is, when I was talking about having a point of view, like, I know exactly what I'm going to get when I read one of his posts or anything he talks about. I think he's kind of got, again, I've never met him. I've admired his work. I admire more what he's been doing the last couple of years. He's got sort of that good trouble mentality, Honestly, this is going to seem a little lame, but I would love that if you said, all right, you're now in charge of WPP, or you're now in charge of something. You got free reign. You can do anything you want within reason. You can't murder anyone, Jordan. Okay. But What would you do? Like if you use George, what would you use your powers? Because he's got amazing powers for good. It's yours now. So I think he has an energy of like Rage Against the Machine, and I love that about him. Punk rock and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't a Molotov cocktail he's throwing, but a whiteboard and a marker to map out the new thing for a big holding company, I would just love to hear his perspective.
I would too. That's a fantastic question. Yeah, I think it's an interesting question in general of like, in a world where holding companies are part of our business model, what's the best vision for that world? But I'd love to, I'm sure George will have some interesting things to say.
Definitely. He always does. But I think someone like that is like, when I go, oh, all right, come on over this side of the table. Because now I want to take your power and use it for progress and building the future. Just a little timeout, a little 10-second timeout for, for him to, But I think, again, like I said, great get. He's amazing. And I think it'll be a fun answer.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I will definitely ask him that. Yeah. Another question I like to ask, and we've been touching on some of this, but if we try to kind of put it together, if you could wave a magic wand and create a more fully desuckified work world, particularly within the world that we're living in of creative and advertising and marketing and earned and all these different things, what does that look like to you?
I think it's a lot less talk and a lot more action in terms of trying lots of things. Like, again, without waving the magic wand and turning it into something, I think that could be fun to answer. But I actually think staying the course with what you've promised your employees you're going to do. And like, if you have to change tack, set up a meeting and tell them the real. Like I think transparency, I don't think we've gone too far, to be honest. I think we create an illusion that we're more transparent than we are because we're sharing what we want to. But I think being able to go, all right, look, I said they were going to do this, and honestly, I made a mistake. Yeah. I think like just that alone, I think will bring down the temperature, because everybody right now is just, the first 5 minutes of every conversation, it's the same, Everyone's holding on for dear life. Everyone's white knuckling their way through this. Yep. And I think staying true to the vision that you put forth and not straying from it. And if you have to let everybody know why and give them the real. I think that would be a good starting point. Because right now there is a lack of trust, and I don't see much happening that's going to change it unless we get real, I
agree. Yeah. I think, I think some resist that because they feel like perhaps you're burdening people with information that they can't do anything about. But the trade-off is the loss of trust, I think. And even if you're honest about that, like, this is the situation, I'm not sure there's much any of us can really do. Here's what I'm trying to do. Right. I think that would be received really well. I even wonder, as you say that, like, are there opportunities? I'm not saying like bring all 6,000 people in on the conversation, but like if I'm an executive team and somebody says, who in your world has the kind of mindset, perspective that might be valuable in this conversation, I want you to go talk to that person. Yeah. So that at least you're coming off the sort of pedestal and you're actually embracing a little more of the diversity within your organization too, by going, like, we've got a lot of problem solvers here. Let's give some of them an opportunity to at least voice a perspective, because maybe we're not seeing something. They're living in it in a way that you never are once you have an E or a C in front of your title.
That's right.
So I think that could be another interesting
great idea. Yeah, it's a great idea. And I think that'll just give, again, even if we don't solve it, we get credibility by trying to bring different thinkers into it. And as long as we don't media train them and let them speak from the heart, and you got the right people, I think that's amazing. Or just get a foosball table. Those things are, I'm kidding.
That's it. I mean, really, ultimately, I don't even know why I have this podcast. I should invest my time delivering foosball tables.
Just 2 or 3 would be amazing. And
that's really cool, right?
People love pizza. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Foosball Fridays with pizza. Yes. Yeah. I think we solved it.
You are doing the Lord's work with this stuff. Definitely.
Well, speaking of the Lord's work, one of my favorite parts of this work is the silly side of this. And I like to, if you listen to my podcast at all, you'll hear some goofy sound effects. I use a lot of cat sounds, although I mix in some others. But I've had every guest pretty much so far contribute to that by making some sound effect of their own. Do you have anything you're up for contributing to the mix?
Always. I'm always up for the fun. So it can't be something I recorded in my house, right? It has to be me.
I'd love it if it was you. That's the idea.
So I was thinking about this question and I watched listened to the other ones. This is me imitating our new puppy that we got. He's like a rescue. His name's Leroy. He's a mutt, a super mutt. But when I come home, this is what I get. Ready? I could have just come from the dentist, but I hear that fucking thing and I'm just set for life. So someday you'll hear him do it, but that's it. I hope that was good enough and it wasn't too off.
It's actually perfect. And as I hear it, I feel a little bit of what you feel with that. I think the power of animals to heal us instantly is actually way underrated. I'm sitting here going like, just take that sound effect and that's in the mental health practitioner's toolkit as something like we can give people. Go home and listen to this 5 times a day and see if you don't feel at least a little bit better.
Exactly. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to license it out, so I'm kidding. But yeah, no, I think we should do that.
Let me know your royalty on that. And yeah.
Well, look, I know you're right. I just said, again, I've always respected you. You do amazing things. This is just yet another one of the things that you do that's amazing. I've loved doing this. So thanks for inviting me. And last thing, if George hates that idea, tell him it wasn't me because I don't want him coming after me.
Exactly. I'll figure out the right time to give attribution or not. The only other thing I would ask is if you have any, if anybody wants to connect with you or, follow what you're doing or thinking out there in the world, is there anything that people can do?
Yeah. I mean, I email me. I would love to should I just say atlasjordan@me.com. Mm-hmm. I think that would be amazing because if I've said anything that resonates in terms of the way in which we work versus just the work we do, I would love to hear from people and just listen to more ideas and stuff. I remember, last thing I'll say is I was working on something about a year ago and it was that we weren't collaborating right. And the creatives were getting so frustrated with the client leads, but the creatives hadn't shared things, right? So I said, how the hell do you expect them to die for the work if you haven't given them a reason to live for it in the first place? And that, I didn't mean to say it and that's exactly what I think we could be doing better is if we bring more people in, get people on our side, whether it's the work or your idea of bringing more people to figure out how to solve this larger thing, give people a reason to want to do this. Because, you know what I mean? So anyway,
I know
I'd love anyone to reach out. I'd love to talk about it. And yeah.
And I would, following you on LinkedIn is not a bad idea as well. I think, that's always a good spot to at least sort of get people to have a chance to hear a little bit of your own point of view and kind of get into your orbit as well.
Appreciate that.
I hope people do connect with you. I think you're the kind of person that I love talking to. And I love that I know you because not only are you somebody who kind of has obviously had a wonderful career in terms of the work you've done, but you've always brought this, the how along with the what, how you do the work, how you show up, how you treat people, how you create teams that ultimately not only serve the work, but serve the people in them. That stuff really matters. And I appreciate that you're out there doing it, Jordan.
Thank you, my man. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on and we'll talk soon, Jordan. Bye-bye.
Man.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. And a huge thanks to Jordan for bringing the perfect blend of smart and smartass to the show. If you enjoyed the episode, Please like, share, rate, review, subscribe, or consider traveling back in time to convince your parents to rename you I love the DesuckifyWork Podcast so you can repeat that lovely mantra every time you meet someone. Royalties for your efforts are negotiable. You can follow Jordan on LinkedIn and reach out at atlasjordan@me.com if you like connecting with kind, generous, and thoughtful humans. This human has thoughts as well, and you can check them out on my site and my Substack newsletter. If you like how things sound, let's take the thinking deeper during a free half-hour strategy session. Bye, everyone.